50 Zephyrian ships moved through the asteroid field like hunting wolves. They came in groups of 5, each group covering the others as they advanced toward the last known position of the human vessel. Their crystal hulls gleamed in the starlight, and their weapons charged with deadly energy. Captain Morrison watched them come from his hiding spot behind a massive asteroid. The Valiant hung motionless in space, all systems running on minimum power to avoid detection. The crew worked quietly at their stations, preparing for the battle that would decide the fate of 3 million human civilians. "Lisa, how are our engines holding up?" Morrison asked in a whisper. "The overcharge is working, but we're running hot," Lisa Park replied from the engineering station. "I estimate we have about 6 hours before something critical fails. Maybe 8 if we're lucky." Morrison nodded. 6 hours was not nearly enough time. The evacuation ships needed more than 70 hours to reach safety. They would have to find a way to make their ship last much longer than it was designed to. Ben Carter studied his weapon displays. "Captain, I've been thinking about our ammunition problem. We can't fight 50 ships the same way we fought 5. We need to be smarter." "What do you have in mind?" "The asteroids," Ben said. "Some of them are rich in metals and minerals. If we can rig them with explosive charges, we could create improvised weapons, turn the entire asteroid field into a minefield." Morrison considered this. It was a good idea, but it would take time they might not have. "How long would it take to set up?" "If we use the mining charges from the cargo bay, maybe 2 hours for a basic setup. We could create a chain reaction that would take out multiple enemy ships at once." "Do it," Morrison ordered. "Amy, any word from the evacuation fleet?" Amy Rodriguez checked her communications equipment. "They're making good progress, but they're still 70 hours away from the hyperspace corridor. The transport ships are loaded with civilians, so they can't go any faster." Morrison felt the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders. 70 hours against 50 enemy ships with more coming behind them. It seemed impossible, but his crew was looking at him with trust and determination. They believed he could find a way to win, even when winning was not really an option. "Dr. Hayes, how are our people holding up?" "Tired but ready," Dr. Hayes replied. "The wounded from the previous battle are stable. Morale is actually quite good considering the circumstances. The crew knows what we're fighting for." Morrison smiled. That was the difference between humans and the Zephyrians. The aliens fought because they were part of a hive mind that gave them no choice. Humans fought because they chose to fight, because they believed in something worth protecting. "All right, people, here's what we're going to do. Ben, take a team and start rigging those asteroids with explosives. Lisa, I need you to modify our engines for hit-and-run tactics. Short bursts of maximum speed followed by complete shutdown. Amy, start monitoring Zephyrian communications. I want to know what they're thinking." The crew dispersed to their tasks. Ben Carter led a team of engineers out in spacesuits to plant charges on nearby asteroids. Lisa Park dove into the engine control systems, making modifications that would let the ship accelerate faster but also hide more effectively. Amy Rodriguez put on her headphones and began listening to the musical language of the enemy. The Zephyrian ships continued their advance, moving methodically through the asteroid field. They used scanning beams to examine each rock, looking for signs of the hidden human vessel. Their formation was perfect, with each ship knowing exactly where the others were at all times. "They're getting close," Amy reported. "I can hear them talking about search patterns and grid coordinates. They're very organized." Morrison watched the nearest group of enemy ships through the main screen. They were only a few kilometers away now, close enough to see the details of their alien design. The ships looked more like sea creatures than spacecraft, with flowing lines and organic curves that seemed to ripple in the light. "Ben, how much longer do you need?" "Almost finished, Captain. 2 more charges and we'll have a nice surprise ready for them." One of the Zephyrian ships suddenly stopped moving. Its scanning beam swept across the asteroid where the Valiant was hiding, and Morrison could see the blue light reflecting off their hull. "They've found us," Amy whispered. "Ben, whatever you've got ready, trigger it now," Morrison ordered. "Charges activated. 30 seconds to detonation." The Zephyrian ship began to signal the others, but Morrison was already moving. "Lisa, Full power to engines. Get us out of here. The Valiant burst from behind the asteroid like an angry beast, engines blazing with blue fire. The sudden acceleration pressed the crew back into their seats as the ship shot toward the nearest group of enemy vessels. The Zephyrians were caught off guard by the aggressive attack. They had expected the human ship to run away, not charge directly at them. Their weapons were still aimed at the asteroid when the Valiant opened fire with everything it had. Missiles and energy beams struck the lead Zephyrian ship, overwhelming its defenses. The alien vessel spun sideways, its hull cracked and leaking atmosphere. Before it could recover, the mining charges detonated. The asteroid field erupted in a chain of explosions that lit up space like a string of fireworks. The carefully placed charges triggered avalanches of rock and metal that swept through the Zephyrian formation. Ships that had survived human weapons were crushed by flying debris or torn apart by secondary explosions. When the chaos ended, 23 enemy ships had been destroyed. The remaining 27 were scattered and confused, their perfect formation broken by the unexpected attack. "Outstanding work," Morrison said. "But they'll regroup quickly. We need to hit them again before they can coordinate." The Valiant raced through the asteroid field, using the floating rocks as cover while it hunted the surviving Zephyrian ships. Lisa Park had programmed the engines to provide short bursts of incredible speed, followed by complete shutdown, making the human ship appear and disappear like a ghost. Ben Carter targeted isolated enemy vessels, using missiles to strike from, ambush before vanishing again. The Zephyrians tried to respond, but their coordination was broken. They were used to fighting as a group, and individual combat was much harder for them. "Captain," Amy called out, "I'm intercepting communications from the main fleet. Admiral Vexithara is angry. He's calling our tactics dishonorable and cowardly." Morrison laughed. "Cowardly? We're one ship against an entire fleet. If that's cowardly, I'd hate to see what he thinks is brave." The battle continued for another hour. The Valiant struck again and again, destroying enemy ships one or two at a time before disappearing into the asteroid field. The Zephyrians tried to adapt, but human tactics were unlike anything they had encountered before. By the end of the engagement, only 8 of the original 50 enemy ships remained operational. They had retreated to the edge of the asteroid field, waiting for reinforcements from the main fleet. "Damage report," Morrison requested. "Hull breaches on decks 7 and 12, Dr. Hayes reported. 43 crew members dead, 68 wounded. The medical bay is at capacity." "Engineering status is yellow," Lisa added. "The engines are holding together, but barely. We've got maybe 4 more hours of combat before something major fails." "Weapons are down to 60% capacity," Ben reported. "We're running low on missiles and 2 of our energy cannon are offline." Morrison studied the tactical display. They had bought some time and inflicted serious damage on the enemy, but it was not enough. The main Zephyrian fleet still had more than 150 ships, and the evacuation convoy still needed 69 hours to reach safety. "Amy, any change in the evacuation status?" "Still on schedule, Captain. The transport ships are sending messages of thanks. They know what we're doing for them." Morrison nodded. Knowing that those 3 million people were still alive and moving toward safety made everything worthwhile. The crew of the Valiant might not survive this battle, but their sacrifice would have meaning. "All right, people. We've proven that humans can fight. Now we need to prove that humans can win even when the odds are impossible. Lisa, I need you to push those engines harder than ever before. Ben, start working on new tactics for the next engagement. Amy, keep monitoring enemy communications. And everybody remember that we're not just fighting for ourselves. We're fighting for the future of humanity." The crew returned to their work with renewed determination. Outside the ship, the stars shone cold and distant, but inside the Valiant, the fire of human courage burned bright and strong. The Zephyrian fleet appeared from hyperspace like a nightmare made real. 200 ships materialized in perfect formation, their hulls gleaming with an unnatural light that seemed to come from within the metal itself. Each vessel was different in size and shape, but they all shared the same alien design that looked more grown than built. Captain Morrison watched from the bridge of the Valiant as the enemy fleet spread out across the star system. The human ship was hidden behind a large asteroid, using the rock as cover while they observed their enemies. The Zephyrian ships moved with perfect coordination, like parts of a single giant machine. "They're beautiful," Amy Rodriguez whispered from her communication station. "And terrifying." Morrison had to agree. The alien ships curved and flowed in ways that human engineering could never achieve. They seemed alive, responding to some intelligence that connected them all. It was like watching a school of fish swimming through space, each individual part of a greater whole. The largest ship hung in the center of the formation. It was twice the size of the Valiant and covered in what looked like crystal spines that pulsed with energy. This had to be the flagship, the command vessel that controlled the entire fleet. "Captain," Ben Carter said from the weapons station, "I'm detecting movement. 5 ships are breaking away from the main group and heading toward the asteroid belt." Morrison nodded. The Zephyrians were smart. They knew the human ship was hiding somewhere among the rocks and they were sending scouts to find it. The hunt was beginning. "Lisa, how are our engines?" Morrison asked. "Running at 120% capacity," Lisa Park replied from the engineering station. "I've managed to boost our power output, but I don't know how long the systems can handle the strain. We might get a few hours of enhanced performance before something breaks." "That might be all we need," Morrison said. "Ben, what's our weapon?" "Status? All missiles loaded and ready. Energy weapons at full charge. We have enough ammunition for maybe 3 major engagements before we run out of everything except the basic pulse cannons." Morrison considered their options. The Valiant was fast and well armed for a human ship, but it was nothing compared to the alien fleet. They would have to be smart about this fight, using every advantage they could find. The 5 Zephyrian scout ships entered the asteroid field, moving carefully between the floating rocks. They used some kind of scanning beam that painted the asteroids with blue light as they searched for the hidden human vessel. "They're getting closer," Amy reported. "I'm picking up their communications. It sounds like musical tones, but there's definitely intelligence behind it." Morrison made his decision. "We can't let them find us yet. We need to draw the main fleet into the asteroid field where their numbers won't help them as much. Ben, target the lead scout ship. 1 missile, maximum yield." "Target locked," Ben confirmed. "Fire." The missile streaked away from the Valiant, its exhaust trail hidden behind an asteroid until the last moment. The Zephyrian scout ship tried to dodge, but human weapons were designed for speed and accuracy. The explosion lit up the asteroid field like a miniature sun, and when the light faded, the alien ship was gone. The remaining 4 scouts immediately changed course, heading straight for the Valiant's position. Their weapons began charging, creating an eerie glow that reflected off the nearby asteroids. "All ships attack the human vessel," a voice said over the communication system. Amy had managed to translate the alien language using the ship's computer. Morrison smiled grimly. "Amy, open a channel to the Zephyrian flagship." "Channel open, Captain." "This is Captain Jake Morrison of the human vessel USS Valiant. To whom am I speaking?" There was a pause, then a new voice came through the speakers. It was cold and emotionless, like a machine trying to sound alive. "I am Admiral Vexithera of the Zephyrian Imperial Fleet. You are the survivors of the human military force we destroyed 3 days ago. Surrender now, and you will be granted a quick death." "That's very kind of you," Morrison replied, "but I'm afraid we'll have to decline. You see, we have somewhere else to be. Your species is inferior, human. You fight as individuals, without coordination or purpose. We are one mind with many bodies. You cannot hope to defeat us." Morrison looked around the bridge at his crew. Each of them was working independently, but they were also working together. Lisa Park adjusted the engine output based on what Ben Carter needed for weapons targeting. Amy Rodriguez fed information to both of them about enemy movements. Dr. Hayes monitored crew health and made sure everyone could keep fighting. "You might be surprised," Morrison said. "We humans have a saying. Never underestimate the power of a few people who refuse to give up." The communication ended, and Morrison turned back to his crew. "All right, people. 4 scout ships coming our way and probably the entire fleet right behind them. Lisa, take us deeper into the asteroid field. Ben, prepare for close combat. Amy, start jamming their communications. The Valiant moved forward, weaving between asteroids as the enemy scouts approached. The alien ships were faster, but they were also more cautious about hitting the floating rocks. Morrison used this to his advantage, leading them into a narrow canyon between 2 large asteroids. The first Zephyrian ship fired its weapons, sending bolts of green energy toward the human vessel. Lisa Park spun the ship sideways, using the asteroid walls as cover. The alien shots hit the rock instead, sending debris flying in all directions. Ben Carter returned fire with the ship's pulse cannons. The red energy beams struck the Zephyrian ship's hull, causing bright flashes where they hit. The alien vessel shuddered but kept coming. Their armor is tough, Ben reported. Energy weapons aren't doing much damage. Switch to missiles, Morrison ordered. Close range, proximity detonation. 2 missiles shot out from the Valiant's launch tubes. The Zephyrian ship tried to intercept them with defensive fire, but the missiles were too close and too fast. They exploded just meters from the alien hull, and this time the damage was severe. The enemy ship spun out of control and crashed into an asteroid. The remaining 3 scouts spread out, trying to surround the human ship. They fired in coordination, forcing the Valiant to dodge in multiple directions at once. Lisa Park pushed the engines to their limit, making the ship dance between the enemy shots like a leaf in a storm. Captain, Amy called out, the main fleet is moving. They're entering the asteroid field. Morrison looked at the scanner display and saw dozens of alien ships flowing into the rocky maze. They moved in formation, supporting each other as they advanced. It was an impressive sight, but it also meant they were committed to fighting in the asteroids instead of open space. Good, Morrison said. That's what we wanted. Ben, take out those last 3 scouts. Use everything we have. The Valiant unleashed its full firepower. Missiles and energy beams filled the space between the asteroids. The Zephyrian scouts fought back desperately, but they were outnumbered by the human weapons, if not the human ships. One by one, they were destroyed. As the last scout ship exploded, Admiral Vexathara's voice came over the communication system again. Impressive, Captain Morrison. You fight with more skill than we expected, but you have only delayed the inevitable. We are sending 50 ships to destroy you. When they are finished, we will continue to the human evacuation route. Morrison checked the time. They had been fighting for 30 minutes, and the evacuation ships still needed 71.5 hours to reach safety. This was going to be a very long battle. Bring them on, Morrison replied. We'll be waiting. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the USS Valiant and watched the stars through the main screen. The ship moved slowly through space, its engines running on low power to avoid detection. Behind them, somewhere in the darkness, an entire alien fleet was hunting for them. The bridge was quiet except for the soft hum of computers and the breathing of his crew. Lisa Park sat at the engineering station, her fingers dancing across the control panel as she tried to fix the damaged systems. Ben Carter watched the weapons display, checking and rechecking their remaining ammunition. Amy Rodriguez listened to radio signals from across the galaxy, hoping to hear something that might help them. 3 days ago, everything had been different. The Third Colonial Fleet had been strong with 50 ships and 30,000 crew members. They had been on their way to establish a new human colony when the attack came. The Zephyrians had appeared from nowhere, their strange crystal ships moving like a swarm of angry insects. The battle had lasted only 6 hours, but it felt like a lifetime. Morrison still remembered the moment when Admiral Stevens' flagship exploded. The communication had cut off in the middle of his final order, leaving only static and the screams of dying ships. One by one, the human vessels had been destroyed until only the Valiant remained. Now they were alone, carrying the last survivors of the fleet and running for their lives. Dr. Carl Hayes walked onto the bridge, his medical uniform stained with blood from treating the wounded. He moved slowly, like a man who had not slept in days. Morrison knew that feeling well. None of them had rested since the battle began. How many? Morrison asked without turning around. 43 dead, 68 wounded. Hayes replied. The wounded will live, but they need real medical facilities, not just what I can do in the ship's medical bay. Morrison nodded. They all knew that getting to a medical facility was unlikely. The nearest human base was 3 weeks away, and the Zephyrians would catch them long before that. The alien ships were faster and had better weapons. The only reason the Valiant had survived this long was luck and the skill of its crew. Amy Rodriguez suddenly straightened at her station. "Captain, I'm getting a transmission from Earth." "Put it through," Morrison said. The main screen changed to show Admiral Catherine Walsh, the head of Earth Defense Command. Her face was tired and worried, but her voice was steady when she spoke. "Captain Morrison, we've received your emergency transmission about the fleet. I'm sorry about Admiral Stevens and the others. They died with honor, fighting to protect humanity." Morrison felt his chest tighten. He had known these people for years, had served with many of them. Now they were gone, and he was responsible for the few hundred survivors on his ship. Admiral Walsh continued. "We're evacuating the outer colonies now. 3 million civilians are on transport ships heading for the Alpha Centauri system. They need 72 hours to reach the hyperspace corridor and escape to safety." Morrison understood immediately. "The Zephyrians will catch them before then. Yes, unless something delays the alien fleet." "Captain, I'm not ordering you to do this. I can't order anyone to die. But if someone could buy us time, those 3 million people would live." The bridge fell silent. Everyone understood what the Admiral was asking. The Valiant would have to fight the entire Zephyrian fleet alone, knowing they could not win. It would be suicide, but it might save millions of lives. Morrison looked around at his crew. These people had followed him through 3 years of deep space exploration and dozens of dangerous missions. They trusted him to make the right choice, even when there was no good choice to make. "Admiral, how long do we have before the Zephyrians reach the evacuation route?" "Our scouts estimate 18 hours before their main fleet arrives at the hyperspace corridor. If you can delay them even a few hours, it might be enough." Morrison nodded. "Understood. We'll do what we can." The transmission ended, leaving them alone with their decision. Morrison turned to face his crew. Lisa Park had stopped working on her repairs and was watching him. Ben Carter's hand rested on his weapon controls. Amy Rodriguez had tears in her eyes, but her face was determined. "You heard the Admiral," Morrison said. 3 million people are running for their lives, and we're the only thing standing between them and the Zephyrian fleet. I won't lie to you. If we do this, we probably won't survive. Anyone who wants to leave can take an escape pod now. No one will think less of you for choosing to live." The crew looked at each other, but no one moved toward the escape pods. Lisa Park was the first to speak. "Captain, I've been working on these engines for 2 years. I know every bolt and wire in this ship. If we're going to fight an entire fleet, you'll need someone who can keep us moving." Ben Carter nodded. "My weapons might not be much against 200 alien ships, but they're better than nothing. I'm staying." Amy Rodriguez wiped her eyes. "Someone needs to stay in contact with the evacuation ships. They deserve to know that people cared enough to die for them." Dr. Hayes smiled sadly. "I took an oath to save lives. If staying here saves 3 million people, then this is where I need to be." One by one, every crew member on the bridge made the same choice. Morrison felt proud and heartbroken at the same time. These people were choosing death to save strangers they would never meet. It was the kind of courage that made humanity special, in a galaxy full of intelligent species. "All right then," Morrison said. "Amy, send a message to all departments. Tell them what we're doing and give them the same choice. Lisa, I need you to push our engines as hard as you can. Ben, start preparing our weapons and defensive systems. We're going to make the Zephyrians work for their victory." The crew returned to their stations with new purpose. They had 18 hours to prepare for a battle they could not win, but they would face it together. Outside the ship, the stars continued to shine, cold and distant. Somewhere among them, an alien fleet was coming to destroy everything humanity had built. But first, they would have to get past one human ship, and the brave souls who called it Home. The USS Valiant turned toward the enemy and began to prepare for war. Admiral Vexithara stood in the command center of his flagship, studying the reports from the failed attack. His crystalline features reflected the light from the ship's displays as he processed the impossible information. One human vessel had destroyed 43 Zephyrian ships in less than 6 hours of combat. The hive mind buzzed with confusion and something that might have been fear. In 3,000 years of conquest, no single enemy ship had ever inflicted such losses on the Zephyrian fleet. The humans fought with a chaotic unpredictability that made the collective intelligence struggle to find patterns. "Deploy siege formation," Vexithara commanded. "Surround the asteroid field. We will starve them of supplies and ammunition. When they emerge, we will be waiting." Meanwhile, Captain Morrison sat in his damaged command chair, reviewing the tactical situation. The Valiant was trapped inside the asteroid field, surrounded by 146 enemy ships arranged in a perfect sphere. Every exit was blocked, and Zephyrian sensors watched for any movement. "It's like being inside a cage," Ben Carter said from the weapons station. His console showed multiple red warning lights where systems had failed during the previous battle. "A cage with teeth," Lisa Park added. She had been working non-stop to repair the engines, but critical components were beginning to fail. "We've got maybe 2 hours of full power left before the fusion reactor shuts down automatically." Morrison looked at the chronometer. 48 hours had passed since the evacuation began. The civilian ship still needed 24 more hours to reach the hyperspace corridor, 24 hours that the Valiant did not have. Dr. Hayes entered the bridge, his medical uniform still stained with blood from treating the wounded. "Captain, I need to speak with you privately." Morrison followed the doctor to a quiet corner of the bridge. Hayes spoke in a low voice so the crew could not hear. "We've lost 137 people, Captain. That's more than 15% of our crew. The wounded are stabilizing, but we're running out of medical supplies. If we take much more damage, I won't be able to save everyone." Morrison nodded grimly. He had known the casualties were mounting, but hearing the exact numbers made it real. These were people he had served with for years, friends who had trusted him to lead them safely through the dangers of deep space. "How much time do we have before the ship becomes inoperable?" "Based on current damage patterns, maybe 6 hours before critical systems start failing. The crew is exhausted, Captain. They're running on determination and stimulants, but that won't last forever." Morrison returned to his command chair and studied the tactical display. The Zephyrian ships maintained their siege formation, patient and disciplined. They knew that time was on their side. Eventually, the human ship would run out of power, ammunition, or crew. "Amy, any word from the evacuation fleet?" "Still on schedule, Captain, 24 hours to safety. The transport ship commanders are asking if there's anything they can do to help us." Morrison almost laughed. The civilian ships were loaded with refugees and had no weapons. There was nothing they could do except keep running and hope that the Valiant could buy them enough time. "Tell them to maintain course and speed. We'll handle things here." Ben Carter suddenly looked up from his console. "Captain, I'm detecting movement in the enemy formation. It looks like they're sending reinforcements from somewhere else in the system." Morrison checked the long-range sensors. 20 more Zephyrian ships were approaching from the direction of the gas giant. They would arrive in 3 hours, bringing the total enemy force to over 160 vessels. "They're not taking any chances," Morrison muttered. "Amy, can you pick up any communications about their strategy?" Amy Rodriguez put on her headphones and listened to the alien chatter. After a few minutes, she turned back to Morrison with a troubled expression. "They're planning something big, Captain. I keep hearing references to a final assault and something called the Doom Protocol. Whatever that is, they're going to use it in 6 hours. Morrison felt cold dread settle in his stomach. 6 hours was exactly when the ship's critical systems would start failing. The Zephyrians had calculated their timing perfectly. "Lisa, what would happen if we overloaded the fusion reactor?" Lisa Park looked up from her repairs, surprise evident on her face. "Overloaded it how, Captain?" "Maximum overload. Turn the entire ship into a weapon." Lisa considered this for a moment. "The explosion would be massive. Probably enough to destroy everything within a 10-kilometer radius. But Captain, that would mean— I know what it would mean, Morrison said quietly. But if we're going to die anyway, we might as well take as many of them with us as possible. The bridge fell silent as the crew processed this information. They had known from the beginning that survival was unlikely, but hearing their captain discuss turning the ship into a bomb made the reality unavoidable. Ben Carter was the first to speak. If we're going to do that, we should try to get close to their flagship first, take out their command structure. The problem is getting through their formation, Lisa said. They've got us surrounded and our engines won't last long enough for a sustained attack. Morrison studied the tactical display, looking for any weakness in the enemy formation. The Zephyrian ships were arranged in perfect geometric patterns, each vessel supporting the others. But perfection sometimes had flaws that chaos could exploit. What if we don't attack the formation? Morrison said slowly. What if we make them come to us? How do we do that? Amy asked. Morrison pointed to the gas giant on the display. That planet has a massive gravity well and a dense atmosphere. If we could lure the Zephyrian flagship into the upper atmosphere, the gravity would trap it there. But how do we get them to follow us? Ben asked. Morrison smiled grimly. We give them something they want more than anything else. We give them the chance to capture a human ship intact. The plan was risky beyond belief. The Valiant would pretend to surrender, allowing the Zephyrian flagship to approach for boarding. At the last moment, they would break free and dive toward the gas giant, forcing the enemy command ship to follow them into the planet's gravity well. It's completely insane, Dr. Hayes said when Morrison explained the plan, which is exactly why it might work, Lisa replied. The Zephyrians think in predictable patterns. They won't expect us to fly directly into a planet. Morrison looked around at his crew. These people had followed him through impossible odds and never once questioned his decisions. Now he was asking them to trust him one final time. This is our only chance to hurt them badly enough to matter. If we can destroy their flagship and Admiral Vexithera, it might disrupt their hive mind long enough for the evacuation ships to escape. Ben Carter checked his weapon systems one last time. I can rig the remaining missiles for proximity detonation. If we get close enough to their flagship, we can damage it before the final assault. Lisa Park nodded. I can modify the engine output to give us one massive burst of speed, enough to break free from their tractor beams and reach the planet. Amy Rodriguez adjusted her communications equipment. I'll handle the surrender message. Make it sound convincing. Dr. Hayes sighed. I'll prepare the crew for high-gravity maneuvers. It's going to be a rough ride. Morrison felt proud of his crew. They were about to attempt something that no sane person would try, and they were doing it with calm professionalism. This was what made humanity special in a galaxy full of intelligent species. All right, people, let's show these aliens what humans do when they're backed into a corner. The USS Valiant prepared for its final battle, racing toward a confrontation that would determine the fate of 3 million innocent lives. In the cold depths of space, one human ship prepared to challenge an entire armada, armed with nothing but courage and the unbreakable will to protect those who could not protect themselves. Amy Rodriguez activated the communication system and took a deep breath. The message she was about to send would either save 3 million lives or doom them all. Her hands trembled slightly as she opened a channel to the Zephyrian flagship. This is the USS Valiant calling Admiral Vexithara. We request permission to discuss surrender terms. The response came quickly, filled with satisfaction and triumph. This is Admiral Vexithara. You have chosen wisely, human. Prepare to be boarded. Any resistance will result in the immediate destruction of your vessel. Morrison nodded to his crew. They had perhaps 10 minutes before the Zephyrian flagship approached close enough for boarding. 10 minutes to prepare for the most dangerous maneuver any of them had ever attempted. Lisa Park worked frantically at the engineering console, routing all available power to the engines while bypassing every safety system in the ship. Warning lights flashed red across her display as she pushed the fusion reactor beyond all recommended limits. Captain, the reactor is running at 200% capacity. We'll get one massive burst of acceleration, but after that the engines will be completely destroyed. Ben Carter loaded the last of their missiles and set them for proximity detonation. All weapons ready, Captain. When we get close to their flagship, I can hit them with everything we have left. Dr. Hayes moved through the ship, warning the crew to secure themselves for extreme gravitational forces. Many of the wounded were too injured to survive what was coming, but they refused to be taken to the escape pods. The Zephyrian flagship approached slowly, its massive bulk dwarfing the human vessel. The alien ship was beautiful in a terrifying way, covered in crystal formations that pulsed with inner light. Smaller vessels surrounded it, ready to prevent any escape attempt. "Prepare for boarding," Admiral Vexithera transmitted. "Your crew will be processed for interrogation. Your ship will become part of the Zephyrian fleet." Morrison waited until the enemy flagship was less than 2 kilometers away. Tractor beams reached out from the alien vessel, trying to lock onto the Valiant's hull. This was the moment when everything would be decided. "Now, Lisa, give me everything you have." Lisa Park triggered the engine overload. The USS Valiant shot forward like a bullet fired from a gun, breaking free from the tractor beams through sheer velocity. The sudden acceleration pressed the crew deep into their seats as the ship raced toward the gas giant. Admiral Vexithera realized immediately that he had been tricked. "All ships, destroy the human vessel. Do not let them escape." But the Zephyrian ships were not in position for an immediate attack. They had arranged themselves for a boarding operation, not a pursuit. By the time they could turn and accelerate, the Valiant was already diving toward the planet's atmosphere. The gas giant loomed ahead of them, a swirling mass of clouds and storms larger than anything the human crew had ever seen. The gravity well pulled at their ship, adding to their velocity as they plunged toward the upper atmosphere. "Their flagship is following us," Ben reported. "Admiral Vexithera is not giving up," Morrison smiled grimly. That was exactly what he had hoped for. The Zephyrian commander's pride would not allow the humans to escape, even if it meant following them into danger. The Valiant hit the outer atmosphere at incredible speed, its hull beginning to glow from the friction. The ship shook violently as it cut through the thin gases, and Morrison could hear metal groaning under the stress. Behind them, the Zephyrian flagship followed, its larger mass making it even more vulnerable to the planet's gravity. The alien vessel tried to slow down, but physics was stronger than technology. Once caught in the gravity well, there was no escape. "Distance to the flagship?" Morrison asked. 8 kilometers in closing," Ben replied. "They're trying to use their weapons, but the atmospheric interference is disrupting their targeting systems. Can you get a lock on them?" "Almost. Just a little closer." The two ships raced through the upper atmosphere, both crews fighting to maintain control as the gravity pulled them deeper into the planet's embrace. The Valiant's hull was beginning to buckle under the stress, and several systems had already failed. "Captain," Lisa called out, "the reactor containment is failing. We have maybe 5 minutes before it goes critical." "Ben, whatever you're going to do it now." Ben Carter fired every remaining missile at the Zephyrian flagship. The weapons streaked across the space between the ships, their exhaust trails visible in the thickening atmosphere. The alien vessel tried to defend itself, but its point defense systems were struggling with the atmospheric conditions. The missiles struck the flagship's hull, causing massive explosions that lit up the sky like artificial suns. The Zephyrian ship staggered under the impact, its crystal formations cracking and spilling energy into space. "Direct hits," Ben reported. "Their main engines are damaged. They're losing altitude faster than we are." Morrison checked the chronometer. The evacuation fleet still needed 6 hours to reach the hyperspace corridor. 6 hours that the Valiant no longer had. But maybe, just maybe, they had done enough damage to buy those precious hours. "Amy, send a final message to the evacuation ships. Tell them we did our best." Amy Rodriguez opened the communication channel with tears streaming down her face. "Evacuation fleet. This is the USS Valiant. Mission accomplished. The enemy flagship is destroyed. Continue to the rendezvous point. Tell Earth that we did our duty." The response came back immediately, filled with gratitude and sorrow. "Valiant, this is convoy leader Captain Sarah Mitchell. 3 million souls are alive because of your sacrifice. You will be remembered forever. Thank you. The ship's hull began to crack as the atmospheric pressure increased. Decks started venting atmosphere into space, and emergency bulkheads sealed, automatically to protect the crew. The Valiant was dying, but it was dying with honor. Reactor breach in 30 seconds, Lisa announced. All hands, brace for impact. Morrison looked around the bridge at his crew one final time. These people had given everything for strangers they would never meet. They had faced impossible odds and never wavered in their duty. They were the best of humanity, and he was proud to die alongside them. It has been an honor serving with all of you, he said quietly. The Zephyrian flagship, mortally wounded and out of control, plunged into the lower atmosphere of the gas giant. The massive ship broke apart under the gravitational stress, its debris scattered across the planet's stormy surface. Admiral Vexithara died without understanding how a single human vessel had defeated his entire strategy. The USS Valiant followed moments later, its reactor finally reaching critical overload. The explosion was visible from the outer edge of the system, a brief star that blazed for a few seconds before fading into memory. But the sacrifice was not in vain. Without their flagship and commanding admiral, the Zephyrian fleet fell into chaos. The hive mind that had connected them was broken, leaving individual ship commanders confused and uncertain. They retreated from the system, unwilling to continue the pursuit without central coordination. The evacuation fleet reached the hyperspace corridor safely, carrying 3 million human civilians to new homes among the stars. As the transport ships jumped to faster-than-light travel, their crews observed a moment of silence for the heroes who had died to save them. Years later, the Battle of Kepler 442 became legend throughout human space. Children learned the names of Captain Jake Morrison and his crew in their history classes. The site of the battle became a memorial, marked by a simple monument that read, "Here stood the USS Valiant and 847 souls who chose duty over life." The Zephyrian Empire marked human space as forbidden territory, warning other species about the dangerous creatures who would sacrifice everything to protect their own. They had learned that humans were more than just another species to be conquered. They were something new in the galaxy, something that fought not because they were forced to, but because they chose to. And in the cold depths of space, where the Valiant had made its final stand, the stars themselves seemed to shine a little brighter, as if honoring the memory of those who had proven that sometimes the greatest victory comes not from winning, but from refusing to surrender when everything depends on your courage. The human spirit had faced the ultimate test and emerged victorious, not because they were stronger or smarter than their enemies, but because they understood something that the Zephyrians never could. Some things are worth dying for, and when you fight for those things, you become something more than just another species struggling to survive in an hostile universe. You become heroes.